Okay, well, here we go. Hello, everyone. This is Reverend Dr. Roger Paul, and tonight we're going to study the Urantia Book, paper 179. I got the number right tonight. The Last Supper. And that's on page 1936 of the original book, or 179, page 179, 11 on other books. Let's say a little prayer and we'll get started. Father, thank you for bringing us together tonight to continue our study for the next 2 weeks on the papers before the crucifixion. And we thank you for the opportunity to do this, and we thank you for bringing us all together, and we want you to open our hearts and minds that we might learn something and share it with others, and that we might do your will in our lives more fully. We thank you and we give you the praise. In your Son's name, Jesus. Amen.
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 All right. Good quick of the night. Let's see if I can get to it here.
Oh, Rodney just joined us.
Hi, Rodney. We just finished, Rodney. We just finished the prayer. I couldn't resist, Rodney. All right. Last Supper. During the afternoon on this Thursday, when Philip reminded the Master about the approaching Passover and inquired concerning his plans for its celebration, he had in mind the Passover supper, which was due to be eaten on the evening of the next day, Friday. It was the custom to begin the preparations for the celebration of the Passover not later than noon of the preceding day. And since the Jews reckoned the day as beginning at sunset, this meant that Saturday's Passover supper would be eaten on Friday night, sometime before the midnight hour. All right. Oops. The one, this is the map in Jerusalem. All right.
The apostles were therefore entirely at loss to understand the Master's announcement that they would celebrate the Passover one day early. They thought, at least some of them did, that he knew he would be placed under arrest before the time of the Passover supper on Friday night, and was therefore calling them together for a special supper on this Thursday evening. Others thought that this was merely a special occasion which was to precede the regular Passover celebration.
Okay, so they all speculated about why he called it early. Stephen, would you take the next one, please?
Okay. The apostles knew that Jesus had celebrated other Passovers without the lamb. They knew that he did not personally participate in any sacrificial service of the Jewish system. He had many times partaken of the Paschal lamb as a gift.
The
Paschal lamb as a guest, but always when he was the host. No lamb was served. It would not have been a great surprise to the apostles to have seen the lamb omitted even on Passover night. And since this supper was given one day earlier, they thought nothing of its absence.
All right. So it was his regular practice not to have the lamb anyway, right? They didn't think anything about it. All right. Millie, would you take the next one, please?
After receiving the greetings of welcome extended by the father and mother of John Mark, the apostles went immediately to the upper chamber while Jesus lingered behind to talk with the Mark family.
Okay. Rodney, would you take the next one, please? Rodney out there?
I would, but I got a bad connection.
Oh. Yeah, your picture looked frozen, so. Okay, well, I'll just take the next one. We'll come back to you on the next round. It had been understood beforehand that the Master was to celebrate this occasion alone with his 12 apostles. Therefore, no servants were provided to wait upon them.
One, the desire for preference. When the apostles had been shown upstairs by John Mark, they beheld a large and commodious chamber, which was completely furnished for the supper, and observed that the bread, wine, water, and herbs were all in readiness on one end of the table, except for the end on which rested the bread and wine. This long table was surrounded by 13 reclining couches, just such as would be provided for the celebration of the Passover in a well-to-do Jewish household.
I know, it's kind of interesting. Most of the pictures you see of the Last Supper, they're all setting up at a table, and they really were reclining, kind of back some at the table, making themselves comfortable. All right. Stephen, would you take the next one?
As the 12 entered this upper chamber, they noticed just inside the door the pitchers of water, the basins and towels for laving their dusty feet, and since no servant had been provided to render this service, the apostles began to look at one another. As soon as John Mark had left them, and each began to think within himself, "Who shall wash our feet?" And each likewise thought that it would not be he who would thus seem to act as the servant of the others.
Typical men, right? Millie, would you take the next one, please?
As they stood there debating in their hearts, they surveyed the seating arrangement of the table, taking note of the higher divan of the host, with one couch on the right and 11 arranged around the table, on up to the opposite of this second seat of honor on the host's right.
So the host had a little bit higher seat there, all right? That would be Jesus' seat. Oh, we lost Rodney again, didn't we?
We did, yes.
Okay. They expected the master to arrive at any moment, but they were in a quandary as to whether they should seat themselves or await his coming and depend on him to assign them their places. While they hesitated, Jesus stepped over to the seat of honor at the left of the host, signifying that he intended there to recline as the preferred guest. This act of Judas immediately stirred up a heated dispute among the other apostles. Judas had no sooner seized the seat of honor than John Zebedee laid claim to the next preferred seat, the one on the right of the host. Simon Peter was so enraged at this assumption of choice positions by Judas and John that as the other angry apostles looked on, he marched clear around the table and took his place at the lowest couch, the end of the seating order and just opposite to that chosen by John Zebedee. Since others had seized the high seats, Peter thought to choose the lowest. And he did this not merely in protest against the unseemly pride of his brethren, but the hope that Jesus should come and see him in the place of the least honor and call him up to a higher one, thus displacing one who had presumed to honor himself. I had this argument once before, remember? All right. Diane.
With the highest and the lowest positions thus occupied, the rest of the apostles chose places, some near Judas and some near Peter, until all were located. They were seated about the U-shaped table on these reclining divans in the following order. On the right of the Master, John. On the left, Judas, Simon Zealot, Matthew, James Zebedee, Andrew, the Alphaeus twins, Philip, Nathaniel, Thomas, and Simon Peter.
All right. So that was the seating order. So if you got a picture, you could write their names in there if you want. All right, Stephen, would you take the next one?
Okay. They are gathered together to celebrate, at least in spirit, an institution which antedated even Moses and referred to the times when their fathers were slaves in Egypt. This supper is their last rendezvous with Jesus, and even in such a solemn setting, under the leadership of Judas, the apostles are led once more to give way to their old predilections for honor, preference, and personal exaltation.
Same old game, right? Millie, would you take the next one, please?
Yes. They were still engaged in voicing angry recriminations when the master appeared in the doorway, where he hesitated a moment as a look of disappointment slowly crept across his face. Without comment, he went to his place, and he did not disturb their seating arrangement.
Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
Hopefully I've got a better connection.
Yeah, we hear you
You
good.
do?
Yeah.
Okay. They were now ready to begin the supper, except that their feet were still unwashed. And they were in anything but a pleasant frame of mind. When the master arrived, they were still engaged in making uncomplimentary remarks about one another, to say nothing of the thoughts of some who had sufficient emotional control to refrain from publicly expressing their feelings.
So they were not in a good mood. All right. Beginning the supper. 2. For a few moments after the master had gone to his place, not a word was spoken. Jesus looked them all over and, relieving the tension with a smile, said, I have greatly desired to eat this Passover with you. I wanted to eat with you once more before I suffered and realized that my hour has come. I arranged to have this supper with you tonight, for as concerns the morrow, we are all in the hands of the Father, whose will I have come to execute. I shall not again eat with you until you sit down with me in the kingdom which my Father will give me when I have finished that which he has sent me into this world. And that's another picture of the supper.
So I wonder what he meant by that.
Well,
Wow, that's a nice picture.
yeah,
That's a nice picture.
yeah, that was a nice picture.
I will not eat with you.
I will not eat with you. In other words, he knew the end was coming. And that's the picture that's on the front screen too. I thought that was a nice one. So if you took this picture,
Very nice.
you could pick out who was who. And I think Judas is the one trying to stand up there in front of the master, but that's the wrong place for him. He would be the
Where did you
Judas.
find this?
Let me back this up. I don't remember, to be honest with you, Rodney. I think I got it online, but it's a picture. It's in Italian, I think, down here, but it's painting from 1569 Paris to 1622, so it's probably in French. Or Italian one. So the guy on the left of Jesus, so it's the side of a cup, that would have been Judas in reality, right? But in this picture, it shows Judas standing up with the bag behind his back. You see that?
Yeah.
He's holding on to the bag, and that's the way they portrayed it. But it's still a pretty good picture. We got another one in here coming up. All right. And what did you ask about that previous paragraph, Rodney?
He commented, I will not eat with you again until
Yeah, he knew.
you shall not.
Yeah, he knew the crucifixion was at hand, and that he would not have the opportunity to take in food after tonight, right? So, and that's what he's talking about. He will not eat with you until after he goes to the mansion worlds, right? And another interesting thing about this too is we have discussed in the past whether we actually have food in the mansion world. Remember doing that? And we were reading something, Diane and I, the other night about that yes, we have food in the mansion world, and we also have water in the mansion world. So apparently the food that we eat in the mansion world is a Urantia type of food. So we will still eat, we just won't have any waste when we get to the mansion world. And that's basically what Jesus is talking about, is he will eat again when they get to the mansion worlds, right? All right.
Okay.
All right, dear.
After the wine and the water had been mixed, they brought the cup to Jesus, who, when he had received it from the hand of Thaddeus, held it while he offered thanks. And when he had finished offering thanks, he said, "Take this cup and divide it among yourselves. And when you partake of it, realize that I shall not again drink with you the fruit of the wine, since this is our last supper. When we sit down again in this manner, it will be in the kingdom to come."
Okay, I want to bring out 2 points. When you read the account of this in both Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they talk about a blood covenant, okay? Jesus did not say anything about himself being a blood sacrifice ever during this meal, okay? And that is not part of the Eucharist, and it's become part of the Eucharist of the church, right? So Jesus did never during this meal say he was being sacrificed for sin, or that his blood was being given up to wash away the sins of the world, right? That's a Pauline concept. That's Paul's version, right? So I want to bring that up. In the Urantia Book, it tells what really happened, and that is not what Jesus said. So Jesus did not intend on sacrificing himself for the sins of the world. He never did. Right.
Well, when it says after the wine and the water had been mixed, what does that mean?
Well, that's the way they drank it back then. The wine was so strong that they would mix it with water to calm it down.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so unless you really wanted to get drunk, you wouldn't drink the wine full strength. Okay. And I just wanted to bring that point up. And we know from the Urantia Book, no blood sacrifice is necessary, and that's why Jesus did not have a sacrificial lamb also, right? He did not participate in the sacrificial system, all right? For some reason, Paul the Apostle missed all of this, right?
Well, he has his background and stuff.
Yeah, he got it all secondhand because he was not at this supper, right? Only the 12 apostles. Okay, so any questions anybody have on that? No? Let's go on. All right. Stephen, would you take the next one, please?
Okay. Jesus began thus to talk to his apostles because he knew that his hour had come. He understood that the time had come when he was to return to the Father, and that his work on earth was almost finished. The Master knew he had revealed the Father's love on earth and had shown forth his mercy to mankind, and that he had completed that for which he had come into the world, even to the receiving of all power and authority in heaven and on earth. Likewise, he knew Judas Iscariot had fully made up his mind to deliver him that night into the hands of his enemies. He fully realized that this traitorous betrayal was the work of Judas, but that it also pleased Lucifer, Satan, and Caligastia, the prince of darkness. But he feared none of those who sought a spiritual overthrow any more than he feared those who sought to accomplish his physical death. The Master had but one anxiety, and that was for the safety and salvation of his chosen followers. And so, with the full knowledge that the Father had put all things under his authority, the Master now prepared to enact the parable of brotherly love.
All right.
Now, we got something here where we've been tossing the ball back and forth there, Roger.
Okay.
Let's see, Judas. Okay, the betrayal was the work of Judas. Okay, and well, we can also look at the fact of who it pleased.
Right.
But the situation there, when I see it, is that here, it's like Jesus will welcome anyone, But there are going to be those that'll refuse to come.
Right.
And here's Judas. He's been with Jesus for probably a little over 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he's still judging him. He's never accepted the love that Jesus has brought to, to even establish the Father.
Right.
Okay. So at this point in time, it's just like with Lucifer. Okay, I've said you can go, but you've just totally refused to accept me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the same thing that's going on with Judas right here, is that total refusal, and it's like there's nothing else I can do for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but then again, look at who did that please? Lucifer and Satan. Okay, so there's that issue. I mean, it's not like Judas is going to go off to Judas's house.
No.
Mm-hmm. He's being honored by another house.
Yeah.
Except the Lord, so he's doing this house. And the one thing that I dealt with, when I first started walking in the Spirit, I'm going to go back a little bit here, when the day with God, with John, and he talked about John's parents and everything, and how that love and all of that was there. And that doesn't by any measure mean that we don't have the same opportunity as John has.
That's right. That's right.
And what goes on is we feel, for myself, that we're not worthy. Mm-hmm. And until we can understand and feel the love of God so strong that we know we're as worthy as Jesus is of that love. Mm-hmm. When you go back here a little bit further, here are these apostles, and it didn't take nothing to put them all arguing amongst themselves.
That's right. They go back to their old ways almost immediately, don't they?
Yeah. But now Jesus, I'm certainly he didn't go, I don't love you guys no more. He didn't. So he didn't. There you go. We're going to make mistakes as we go along, but we got to know that whatever we feel that makes us not worthy is really coming from this dark side here.
Yeah,
because we are. Go ahead.
It's really coming from our own personalities, thinking we're not worthy. If it came right down to it, none of us are really worthy of salvation. But it works just the opposite. All of us are worthy of salvation because of what? Because of God, because of that Father fragment. And He's given a piece of Himself to help bind us up to make ourselves worthy for salvation. And yet, even though He's done that, you have a choice. You have free will, so you have a choice. So Judas made that choice, just like Lucifer, Satan, and Calagassa made that choice. They didn't have to choose to go over to the dark side, did they? They did it all on their own, and so did Judas. Even though he had been in the presence of perfection for over 3 years, right? He still made the wrong choice because he was more concentrating on himself and his own pride. And it comes back to the me syndrome all over again. And in order to make yourself feel more worthy of your salvation, you almost have to be self-forgetting, right? Forget the things you've done. You have to forget the sins that you've done. And you have to remember that the love of God and the love of Christ overrides all of that. And that's why no sacrifice is necessary also. It's really interesting that it talks in this very paragraph that that the Master revealed the Father's love on earth and shown forth His mercy to mankind. And those two things make this whole sacrificial concept wrong, right? Because when you say you have to have a sacrifice for the stupid things you do, then you're saying that that God the Father is not powerful enough and merciful enough to forgive you for your own misdeeds, right? And that's not the right way to approach God. It just isn't,
Yeah, I'd say the new road is we're not dealing with God out of fear. We're dealing with Him out of love.
Yeah.
And once we can truly feel that love, we're just not going to want to disappoint him. We're going to
No.
try our best to not disappoint him.
That's
you
right.
know?
And that love comes from the family relationship, if you think about it. If you were loved by your parents, your father and your mother, if you're loved by your father and you have a good father, you have a good example of the fatherly love. And when you don't, it puts you at a disadvantage slightly.
Well, there's more to
Overcome.
You know,
Yeah, it does.
That's it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You still have to overcome that. Okay, let's move on. All right. Who's up?
I don't know.
I think you're up reading, Stephen. I'm not sure.
I just read.
You just read? Okay, well, Millie's up then.
Number 3, washing the apostles' feet. After the drinking the first cup of the Passover, it was the Jewish custom for the host to arise from the table and wash his hands. Later on in the meal, and after the second cup, all of the guests likewise rose up and washed their hands. Since the apostles knew that their master never observed these rites of ceremony, hand washing, they were very curious to know what he intended to do. After they had partaken of this first cup, he arose from the table and silently made his way over to near the door where the water pitchers, basins, and towels had been placed. And their curiosity grew into astonishment as they saw the master remove his outer garment, gird himself with a towel, and began to pour water into one of the foot basins. Imagine the amazement of these 12 men who had so recently refused to wash one another's feet and who had engaged in such unseemly disputes about position of honor at the table, when they saw him make his way around the unoccupied end of the table to the lowest seat of the feast, where Simon Peter reclined, and kneeling down in the attitude of a servant, make ready to wash Simon's feet. As the master knelt, all 12 arose as one man to their feet. Even the traitorous Judas so far forgot his infamy for a moment as to rise with his fellow apostles in this expression of surprise, respect, and utter amazement.
And Jesus planned this beforehand, didn't he? Okay. As a message to his apostles and the message to the world, right? And that's why we have a record of this. Okay. And we'll talk about that message in a second. Rodney, would you take the next?
There stood Simon Peter, looking down into the upturned face of his master. Jesus said nothing. It was not necessary that he should speak. His attitude plainly revealed that he was minded to wash Simon Peter's feet. Notwithstanding his frailty of the flesh, Peter loved the master. This Galilean fisherman was the first human being wholeheartedly to believe in the divinity of Jesus and to make full and public confession of that belief. And Peter had never sensed the divine nature of the master. Since Peter so revered and honored Jesus in his heart, it was not strange that his soul resented the thought of Jesus' kneeling there before him in the attitude of a menial servant and proposing to wash his feet as would have. When Peter presently collected his wits sufficiently to address the master, he spoke the heart feelings of all his apostles.
So they all did not want Jesus to wash their feet, didn't they? They did not want to feel like he reduced himself to the point of a servant. And that was the whole point of this exercise, is the brotherhood of man is about service, right, to one another. Okay. After a few moments of this great embarrassment, Peter said, "Master, did you really mean to wash my feet?" And then looking up into Peter's face, Jesus said, "You may not fully understand what I am about to do, but hereafter you will know the meaning of all these things." Then Simon Peter, drawing a long breath, said, "Master, you shall never wash my feet. And each of the apostles nodded their approval of Peter's firm declaration of refusal to allow Jesus, thus to humble himself before them. Now, before we go on to the next paragraph, do y'all remember over at Rodney's house, we had the Remembrance supper one year. Remember that? And me and Diane washed everyone's feet. Y'all remember that? Normally, an experience like that will stay in your mind forever. You might forget everything else about that day, but that act you will remember. And it's all about doing the act of service, and that for us to be brothers and sisters, it is our responsibility to serve one another, even in the lowest possible thing we could do, right? And that's what that's about. It's remembering that we're servants and that we have to serve one another as the brotherhood of man, right? Okay. And let's keep going here.
And
Yeah.
I should add, physically, mentally, and spiritually.
That's correct, Rodney. Physically, mentally, and spiritually. We have to serve one another in all aspects, right? You know, everything. And that just shows our love for one another, doesn't it? You know, it's an act of love. All right. Let's go on. Diane?
The dramatic appeal of this unusual scene at first touched the heart of even Judas Iscariot, but when his vainglorious intellect passed judgment upon the spectacle, he concluded that this gesture of humility was just one more episode which conclusively proved that Jesus would never qualify as Israel's deliverer, and that he had made no mistake in the decision to desert the Master's cause.
So it just cemented his opinion about the situation, didn't it? So he took it completely wrong, didn't he? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen.
Okay. As they all stood there in breathless amazement, Jesus said, Peter, I declare that if I do not wash your feet, you will have no part with me in that which I'm about to perform. When Peter heard this declaration, coupled with the fact that Jesus continued kneeling there at his feet, he made one of those decisions of blind acquiescence and compliance with the wish of one whom he respected and loved. As it began to dawn on Simon Peter that there was attached to this proposed enactment of service some
signification. There we go.
Signification that determined one's future connection with the Master's work, he not only became reconciled to the thought of allowing Jesus to wash his feet, but in his characteristic and impetuous manner said, Then, Master, wash not my feet only, but also my hands and my head.
Typical Peter, isn't it? And this is a picture, let me change it down here too, of Jesus washing Peter's feet. All right. And all the apostles looking on. Okay. Millie, would you take the next one?
As the Master made ready to begin washing Peter's feet, he said, He who is already clean needs only to have his feet washed. You who sit with me tonight are clean, but not all. But the dust of your feet should have been washed away before you sat down at meat with me. And besides, I would perform this service for you as a parable to illustrate the meaning of a new commandment, which I will presently give you.
All right.
And he's saying, wash my hands and my head also. It's like give a mouse a cookie and they'll ask for a glass of milk.
That's right. Rodney, would you take the next one?
Is that on your calendar, Millie?
In like manner, the Master went around the table in silence, washing the feet of his 12 apostles, not even passing by Judas. When Jesus had finished washing the feet of the 12, he donned his cloak, returned to his place of host, and after looking over his bewildered apostles, said,
So they still didn't even understand, did they? All right. Do you really understand what I have done to you? You call me master, and you say, well, for so I am. If then the master has washed your feet, why is it that you were unwilling to wash one another's feet? What lesson should you learn from this parable in which the master so willingly does that service which his brethren were unwilling to do for one another? Verily, verily, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, neither is one who is sent greater than one who sends him. You have seen the way of service in my life among you, and blessed are you who have the gracious courage to serve. But why are you so slow to learn that the secret of greatness in the spiritual kingdom is not like the methods of power in the material world? Okay, and that's the whole point of the feet washing, right? Service. That's what we're supposed to do for one another, is serve. All right, Diane?
When I came into this chamber tonight, you are not content proudly to refuse to wash one another's feet, but you must also fall to disputing among yourselves as to who should have the places of honor at my table. Such honors the Pharisees and the children of this world seek, but it should not be so among the ambassadors of the heavenly kingdom. Do you not know that there can be no place of preference at my table? Do you not understand that I love each of you as I do the others? Do you not know that the place nearest me, as men regard such honors, can mean nothing concerning your standing in the kingdom of heaven? You know that the kings of the Gentiles have lordship over their subjects, while those who exercise the authority are sometimes called benefactors. But it shall not be so in the kingdom of heaven. He who would be great among you, let him become as younger, while he has...
That's right.
I'm doing it again. He who would be great among you, let him become as the younger, while he who would be chief, let him become as one who serves. Who is the greater, he who sits at meat, or he who serves? Is it not commonly regarded that he who sits at meat is the greater? But you will observe that I am among you as one who serves. If you are willing to become fellow servants with me in doing the Father's will, in the kingdom to come you shall sit with me in power, still doing the Father's will in future glory.
So that's the key. Service. Love of the Father and service, right? I know y'all get tired of me here saying that. Stephen, would you take
Okay. When Jesus had finished speaking, the Alphaeus twins brought on the bread and wine with the bitter herbs and the paste of dried fruits for the next course of the Last Supper.
All right. I guess no steak and eggs, huh? Millie, would you take the next one?
Four, last words to the betrayer. For some minutes, the apostles ate in silence, but under the influence of the master's cheerful demeanor, they soon drawn into conversation, and ere long, the meal was proceeding as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred to interfere with the good cheer and social accord of the extraordinary occasion. After some time had elapsed, in about the middle of the second course of the meal, Jesus, looking them over, said, I have told you how much I desire to have this supper with you, and knowing how the evil forces of darkness have inspired to bring about the death of the Son of Man, I'm determined to eat this supper with you in this secret chamber and a day in advance of the Passover, since I will not be with you by this time tomorrow. I have repeatedly told you that I must return to the Father. Now my hour has come, but it was not required that one of you should betray me into the hands of my enemies.
What does he just say? He told he told Judas that it was not necessary for him to betray him, that the Sanhedrin would have done it on their own, right? And the Pharisees. So it was a waste for him to give up his life and give up his future to betray the master for this imaginary honor that he was going after. And it also tells us this, that whether Judas had betrayed the master or not, Jesus would have still been crucified, right? Because that was in the mind of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and they would have not stopped until this was done, right? So the betrayal of Judas was of no big accord according to Jesus, right? It was only that way in our minds because we thought that Judas sold him out for 30 pieces of silver according to the New Testament, right? And that's not really what happened. That's not why he did it. All right. Okay. Would you take the next one?
I've heard this, having already been robbed of much of their self-assertiveness and self-confidence by the parable of the feet washing and the master's subsequent discourse, they began to look at one another while in disconcerted tones they hesitatingly inquired, "Is it I?" And when they had all so inquired, Jesus said, "While it is not necessary,"
No, it is necessary.
"while it is necessary that I go to the Father, it was not required that one of you should become a traitor to fulfill the Father's will. This is the coming to fruit of the concealed evil in the heart of one who failed to love the truth with his whole soul. Deceitful is the intellectual pride that precedes the spiritual downfall. My friend of many years, who even now eats my bread, will be willing to betray me. He will dip his hand me in the dish."
So Judas was dipping in the dish the same time that Jesus was saying this, right? And none of the other apostles caught this when he said this. They were all, in their minds, they were thinking about who would betray me, right? And when Jesus had thus spoken, they all began to ask, "Is it I?" And as Judas, sitting on the left of the master, again asked, "Is it I?" Jesus, dipping the bread in the dish of herbs, handed it to Jesus, saying, "You have said." But the others did not hear Jesus speak to Judas. John, who reclined on Jesus' right hand, leaned over and asked the master, "Who is it? We should know who it is that has proved untrue to his trust." Jesus answered, "Already have I told you, even he to whom I gave the sup." But it was so natural for the host to give us up to the one who sat next to him on the left that none of them took notice of this, even though the master had so plainly spoken. But Judas was painfully conscious of the meaning of the master's words associated with his act, and he became fearful lest his brethren were likewise now aware that he was the betrayer. All right. So Jesus plainly told them, but none of them caught it, right?
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Peter was highly excited about what had been said, and leaning forward over the table, he addressed John. "Ask him who it is, or if he has told you, tell me who is the betrayer."
All right. So none of them picked it up, did they? They were all thinking in their minds so heavily they didn't even hear what the master said. Stephen, would you take the next one?
Okay. Jesus brought their whispering to an end by saying, "I sorrow that this evil should have come to pass, and hope even up to this hour that the power of truth might triumph over the deception of evil. But such victories are not won without the faith of the sincere love of truth. I would not have told you these things at this, our last supper, but I desire to warn you of these sorrows, and so prepare you for what is now upon us. I have told you of this because I desire that you should recall, after I have gone, that I knew about all these evil plottings, and that I forewarned you of my betrayal. And I do all this only that you may be strengthened for the temptations and trials which are just ahead.
So he was giving them a stern warning about the future coming up, wasn't he? All right. Millie.
When Jesus had thus spoken, leaning over toward Judas, he said, "What you have decided to do, do quickly." And when Judas heard these words, he arose from the table and hastily left the room, going out into the night to do what he had set his mind to accomplish. When the other apostles saw Judas hasten off after Jesus had spoken to him, they thought he had gone to procure something additional for the supper, or to do some other errand for the master, since they supposed he still carried the bag.
The bag, which we found out last night, in last night's session, that he had already given to David Zebedee, right? All right.
Yes.
Okay, and this is Judas with the bag. This is wrong too, because he wasn't carrying the bag any longer. David Zebedee had it. Okay. All right, Rodney.
The supper, with its tender episodes and softening touches, was Jesus' last appeal to the deserting Judas, but it was of no avail. Warning, even when administered in the most tactful manner and conveyed in the most kindly spirit, as a rule, only intensifies hatred and fires the evil determination to carry out to the full one's own selfish projects when love is once really dead.
All right. And when it's really dead, most times there's no going back, right? Oh, I forgot to change that one. Sorry, y'all at home. All right. Establishing the Remembrance Supper. As they brought Jesus the third cup of wine, the cup of blessing, he arose from the couch and taking this cup in his hands, blessed it, saying, "Take this cup, all of you, and drink it. This shall be the cup of my remembrance. This is the cup of the blessing of the new dispensation of grace and truth. This shall be to you the emblem of the bestowal and ministry of the divine Spirit of truth. And I will not again drink this cup with you until I drink in new form with you in the Father's eternal kingdom." Okay, notice here he didn't say anything, "This is the cup of my blood which is shed for your sins." That's Paul's idea, right? He's saying this is the cup of remembrance. We're supposed to remember him, right? And the blessing of the new dispensation of grace and truth. So this cup is also a blessing to us that this starts a new dispensation. As Jesus is resurrected, we have a new dispensation of grace and truth, and this will start with what? The bestowal of the Spirit of truth at Pentecost. Okay? And that's why this is so important. And that's why Jesus wanted us to remember this supper. The Eucharist should be about remembering Jesus and remembering the pouring out of the Spirit of truth for the new dispensation. Right? That's what it's supposed to be about, the remembrance. Okay? Too bad Paul the Apostle is not here to hear all this, right? All right. Diane?
The apostles all sensed that something out of the ordinary was transpiring as they drank of this cup of blessing in profound reverence and perfect silence. The old Passover commemorated the emergence of their fathers from a state of racial slavery into individual freedom. Now the Master was instituting a new remembrance supper as a symbol of the new dispensation, wherein the enslaved individual emerges from the bondage of ceremonialism and selfishness into the spiritual joy of the brotherhood and fellowship of the liberated faith sons of the living God.
The fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, right? All right. Stephen.
Okay. When they had finished drinking this new cup of remembrance, the master took up the bread and, after giving thanks, broke it in pieces and, directing them to pass it around, said, "Take this bread of remembrance and eat it. I have told you that I am the bread of life, and this bread of life is the united life of the Father and the Son in one gift. The word of the Father, as revealed in the Son, is indeed the bread of life." When they had partaken of the bread of remembrance, the symbol of the living word of truth, incarnated in the likeness of mortal flesh, they all sat down.
Okay, we'll give you another lesson on this little paragraph, right? The breaking of the bread is not to symbolize the breaking of the bones of Christ. It wasn't to symbolize the breaking up of Christ's body, right? It's supposed to be the bread of remembrance, that the fact that Christ brought the love of the Father and the love of the Son as one gift, and he is the bread of life, is the word of the Father, which was revealed in the Son, right? And that is the bread of life. And that's why we take the bread. It's the bread of remembrance of our relationship with the Father and the Son as the gift, right? And the bread of life being our spiritual heritage. All right?
Roger, I got a question.
Sure.
Do you think that the Master or Jesus set this up for us to do a special remembrance, like a communion?
Yes.
Or what I get out of it is every time we sit to eat and drink, to remember this.
No, I think it's the first thing, Rodney. I think it should be a special thing that we take the time out to concentrate just on the remembrance of Christ and the remembrance of our relationship with the Father and the Son, Christ, right, in a special ceremony. Because we only have two things that Jesus left us, and that is what? The Eucharist, or the supper, and what else? Baptism, right? That's the only two ceremonies that Jesus approved for us, if you think about it. So I think by doing this every time you eat, you lose the specialness of the remembrance of doing this. You know, we can always bless our food. You know, it's an everyday thing. We eat 3 times a day. You know, we bless our food 3 times a day if you go through that routine. But by taking time out to do it separately, it becomes the ceremony that Jesus intended. I think that's what we should do. Okay? And it's hard to do with our group all being in different places. You know, I guess we could get online and all take our own little cup of wine and our own little piece of bread and go through the process. But yeah, it is the only two ceremonies that Jesus left us.
Okay,
Baptism and the Eucharist, right? All right. Who's up there? Huh? I think Rodney's up, aren't you?
I thought it was Millie, but
Billy, you may be up. I think you are. Come to think of it. I think Stephen just read it. I get talking so much I forget where I am. Turn your mic back on, man.
In instituting this remembrance supper, the Master was always as was always his habit, resorted to parables and symbols. He employed symbols because he wanted to teach certain great spiritual truths in such a manner as to make it difficult for his successors to attach precise interpretations and definite meanings to his words. In this way, He sought to prevent successive generations from crystallizing his teachings and binding down his spiritual meanings by the dead chains of tradition and dogma. In the establishment of the only ceremony of sacrament associated with his whole life mission, Jesus took great pains to suggest his meanings rather than to commit himself to precise definitions. He did not wish to destroy the individual's concept of divine communion by establishing a precise form. Neither did he desire to limit the believer's spiritual imagination by formally cramping it. He rather sought to set men's reborn soul free from the joyous wings, upon the joyous wings of a new and living spiritual liberty.
Okay. And what did we do? We did exactly what he was trying to keep from doing, right? We crystallized this teaching into a set form, didn't we? Okay, throughout most of the churches. And that's really a pity that it's that way. It shouldn't be. And of course, this is another painting. This is the most famous one of Leonardo da Vinci of the Last Supper. All right, everybody knows that one. Okay, Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
Notwithstanding the Master's effort thus to establish this new sacrament of the remembrance, those who followed after him in the intervening centuries saw to it that his expressed desire was effectively thwarted.
Thwarted.
Thwarted,
Yeah.
you're right. And that his simple spiritual symbolism of that. Hello?
Yeah, you're still there, Rodney.
Well, I lost the screen.
Oh, did you?
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I can read from the book, though.
Okay.
I can't find where I am in the book.
Okay, I'll take it up from there.
Yeah.
That last night in the flesh had been reduced to precise interpretations and subjected to the almost mathematical precision of a set formula. Of all Jesus' teachings, none have become more tradition standardized. In other words, we have turned it into a standardized thing. You say this, you do this, and it's all about the blood of Christ and the body of Christ, right? That's the way we were taught. That's the way it's done in most of the churches. All right. This supper of remembrance, when it is partaken by those who are Son-believing and God-knowing, does not have to have associated with it symbols of any man's puerile misinterpretations regarding the meaning of the divine presence, for upon all such occasions the Master is really present. The Remembrance Supper is the believer's symbolic rendezvous with Michael. When you become thus spirit conscious, the Son is actually present, and his spirit fraternizes with the indwelling fragment of his Father.
Well,
It's pretty important, isn't it?
that's great.
All right. Diana.
After they had engaged in meditation for a few moments, Jesus continued speaking. When you do these things, recall the life I have lived on earth among you, and rejoice that I am to continue to live on earth with you and to serve through you. As individuals, contend not among yourself as to who shall be greatest. Be you all as brethren. And when the kingdom grows to embrace large groups of believers, likewise should you refrain from contending for greatness or seeking preferment between such groups.
All right, that's what we do a lot, don't we? I mean, think
It's
about
almost an unconscious response.
it. It is. Stephen, would you take the next one, please?
All right. And this mighty occasion took place in the upper chamber of a friend. There was nothing of sacred form or of ceremonial consecration about either the supper or the building. The Remembrance Supper was established without ecclesiastical sanction.
Yeah, ecclesiastical sanction.
Ecclesiastical, there we go.
Yeah. Nobody
Help
approved
me.
it. The church didn't approve it. Anything approved it. It was just there, right? So,
Mhm.
Millie, would you take the next one, please? I believe this is the last one. No, maybe not.
Two more.
Yeah, okay.
When Jesus had thus established the supper of the remembrance, he said to the 12, "And as often as you do this, do in remembrance of me. And when you do remember me, first look back upon my life in the flesh. Recall that I was once with you, and then by faith discern that you shall all have sometimes sup with me in the Father's eternal kingdom. This is the new Passover, which I leave with you, even the memory of my bestowal life, the word of eternal truth, and of my love for you, the outpouring of my spirit of truth upon all flesh."
And I want to bring up a point. I love this statement that it's "and of my love for you," right? Jesus is showing his love for us, each and every one individually, by the pouring out of the Spirit of truth. You know, so if you don't think anybody loves you or anything loves you, you always have the love of Jesus and the Father, right? I mean, if nothing else, that should be reassuring to everyone, right? Rodney, would you take the last one for us, please?
And they ended this celebration of the old but bloodless Passover in connection with the inauguration of the new supper of the remembrance by singing all together the 118th Psalm.
All right. And I believe that when we did this, we did the same thing, didn't we? We read the 118th Psalm when last time we did this. Oh, okay. I haven't stopped the video yet, y'all. I just wanted everybody at home to see all y'all's faces in full view for a change. So we can get you on recording instead of little bitty boxes over in the corner. And let's have a little prayer before we close tonight. Stephen, no, Diane, would you like to close us in prayer?
Eternal Father, Mother God, we just thank you so much for this scripture tonight, to reveal the truth of what actually happened and to keep all of our minds straight, the exact words that we have studied tonight, incorporate them into our inner beingness and share them with others as we have the opportunity, and help us to be true and to always do the will of God to the very best of our ability. We are in remembrance of Jesus. It is in your name we pray and give thanks. Amen.
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 And everyone at home, we thank you for joining us too. We're getting lots of people listening to our videos now, and I just want to say we love you all at home too, like we love each other. And we thank you for joining us. This is a very special season coming up, and we hope you've enjoyed this special study. We're going to keep going on until, I guess what, 11 more days here? Something like that? 11 more days. Every night for the next 11 days, we'll still be doing this. So if you have the opportunity to join us, feel free to do so. We thank you. And thank you all the video listeners for listening too.